What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you another look at what's going on in pop culture this week. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined by my co-host, who likes his coffee like he likes his men, full of soy and sweet enough to not really. I forgot the line
Not
honestly.
offend anyone or something.
Yeah, not offend anyone. Dave Martinson, Dave, how you doing, man?
And Pat, did you know Central Park is just SeaWorld for trees? My
Yeah,
guy?
I learned that this week. The 1975 thespians of music. I guess that's my SeaWorld comparison to them. Just enlightening me with their very strange observations on being funny in a foreign language, which we're going to be talking about this week with a few other albums and a couple of movies, as well as some big TV shows that wrapped up this week. But Dave, before we start, just wanted to check in with you. We're starting to get into kind of into movie awards season. We're starting to kind of move towards the end of the year. Where are you at with just the year in general in terms of music and pop culture? You feel like this is a good year, middling year?
Yeah, I've seen less movies than I normally would at this point in the year. And there are plenty of things to come, but I've been kind of counting up my list and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna come in a little low on the total this year. A lot of big people dropped albums though, you know? Especially if you go back a few months into last year. I mean, it's hard to complain with Adele,
Adele.
Drake, Kendrick, Beyonce, this Friday, Taylor Swift, and Rihanna doing the Super Bowl and maybe making an album. You know, we've
Yeah.
done worse. I don't know. I'm feeling pretty good. TV's been hot as usual, especially in the beginning of the year.
That's the thing is we're gonna be talking about a huge TV show today, and I was just thinking how TV feels like it's as strong as ever. Maybe even this is a stronger year with the Rings of Power and Hot D just competing for viewers at the same time. But for me, movies and music feel a little low. You mentioned like Kendrick dropping an album, Drake dropping an album, Kanye dropped an album, and they all kind of
Oh yeah, he
flopped,
did.
right? And so these people who we usually and not that Kendrick's album is bad. We talked about that in our Kendrick ranking, so go check that out. It's youtube.com/nostalgia pod. But it's underwhelming. I guess Adele, you're right. Adele and Beyonce totally delivered on what we wanted, but I don't know if I have one album that I'm like my definite number one of the year at this point. Kind of surprising.
Yeah, it's kind of like Beyonce by default. Definitely the
Yeah.
most impressed I've been. Rosalia. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think making a songs list is going to be harder than normal. I feel like.
I
Um,
agree.
it's fun though. It's fun when it takes a little more work, get a little more spicy with the
Spicy.
listicles.
Well, Dave, do you think any of Kenny Mason's songs from Ruffs, his newest album, are going to make it to your songs of the year list?
wouldn't necessarily rule it out. I did quite enjoy Kenny's new work, Ruffs. I think he's just a very intriguing artist, and he has been since we talked about him last year, about a year and a half ago. A really genuine, convincing genre blend of hip hop and rock music. Uh, I think he's very credible and does it really well. And I liked Ruffs quite a bit. This album, mixtape, whatever it is, I don't fucking know. This actually came out on September 28th, completely missed me until Pitchfork reviewed it last Friday. I was like, how did I miss this? Because I really liked Angelic Hoodrat Superstar last year. And now he's actually signed to a major. He's on RCA Records. And yet I feel like this got no damn promo, which I think is a shame because he is doing this the best among the best when it comes to something that's a bit more popular nowadays, which is bringing other genres into hip hop. But he's doing it very well, and he definitely deserves to keep rising because I think this is another great example of his talents.
Yeah. Sorry. Angelic Hoodrat really, I think, stood out as, an enunciation of Kenny as this voice who feels very familiar, but also kind of stands apart from his peers. When I hear him, it's hard not to think of Denzel Curry. As someone that
Mm.
is kind of in the same lane. Sort of Denzel has a little bit more intensity, I think, to his songs, but that rap rock kind of blend that together. And on Ruffs, I feel like Kenny kind of just continues to refine his sound and his work. It's funny. I feel like a lot of the time I'm really taken by the beginning of albums, and by the end, I feel like things kind of peter out for me. But I actually found the second half of this album to be really, really strong and kind of grab me even more than the first half. I think that's because I think the beginning I felt was a bit more like I don't want to say like traditional hip hop, but more so just like hip hop rap. But then the second half you get a little bit more of the rock parts into it, and I think he actually does pretty well when he's doing some singing. Not like a voice that'll blow you away, but some of his melody is just really impressive for someone so young. So I really liked this. What were the songs or parts of the album that stood out to you?
Yeah, well, I think the reason he's so convincing at this is because he can have like these really cool moments like out of nowhere on his songs where there's like these specific vocal inflections, or he'll just debut a completely new flow in verse two, and it'll be like super guitar heavy all of a sudden. Like he really meshes all this quite well. But I think him as a performer uh, is also just so varied. Like when he raps, he often reminds me of someone like Jid. And of course, he
Mm,
was on Jid's album with Dance Now, one of my favorite songs off the Forever Story. But on a song like Halos, track two, it's like that flow reminds me of Jid a lot.
yep.
But not too long after that, you have a song like Double Up, which is much more melodic. And I feel like his performance on those verses is just really impressive. A song like Dip, I think the same thing, his performance. I just really like how he modulates his voice and kind of switches stuff up and kind of brings a more like punk or emo-y vibe to his performing. And when he does just do more traditional hip hop, it's also really good because he's just gonna like spit, again, kind of like a Jid. So um, in that beginning run too, you have Minute Forever where the guitar is like super noticeable. But then at the back half, I think there's a lot of cool songs too. Like you said, you were definitely more struck with that one. I think songs like Givenchy and
Yeah.
Shell stood out to me. Like, yeah, I just really enjoy, I think, the kind of unexpectedness you get from like the listening experience with his work.
Yeah, and like for me, the album really at the beginning. I agree. There's some good parts. I don't want to knock like the beginning wasn't good, but I think second half when we get to Nosedive with Gene Dawson,
Yeah.
that beginning is so like rock feeling like you're about to like go to like a completely metal show, and then he just starts completely flowing, but he's changing it up as he goes along. He's just bringing so much energy to it, and he just completely then moves into this like sing-songiness, this auto-tune sing-songiness in the second half that really like works for the song and kind of brings this like uh different feel to the ending, and it just like really impressed me. um And I think like as you go through here, like you have a song like that, and you're like, he's probably just gonna hit the second half and just kind of go all metal. But then the next track, 333 Adam, is like just this like vibey, but still like kind of metal sounding song. But he just flows over this so like well and like brings this different energy. I'm like, he's really switching it up. I agree. I think his ability to change his voice similar to like but you mentioned Jid. I think he does a really good job. Kendrick, someone else we've talked about this with, really adds this element of like not needing a lot of features on this, and you only get three throughout the whole
Hmm.
thing, and it just kind of makes the album feel unexpected at times, which I think creates this um I don't know sense of optimism that we're gonna get some really like cool projects out of him in the future and get even more interesting stuff. So did you have like one song that you say like is the song from this?
Yeah, that's tough, right? Because there's so many different things to gravitate towards. Hmm. I would say my favorite thing. I just really love him on Dip. I think he sounds really good. But there's so many good choices. I mean, you mentioned Nosedive with Gene Dawson. I like that one quite a bit. And Gene Dawson actually just had an album come out like 2 weeks ago. He's a very similar artist if you're into this sort of thing. Yeah, I think there's many candidates for favorite song,
Yeah,
which is awesome.
definitely. Um, Kenny, I think a artist that's definitely rising in terms of our eyes. Do you think other
Mhm.
people are seeing it the same way?
So we actually have a data point because on our review in April 2021, he only had 662,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, and now, a year and a half later, it's at 2.8 million. So he is getting more popular. Good for him. He is now on a major. You'd hope that would continue.
I hope so. He's definitely a really interesting artist. Dave, well, I think we're gonna move on, but if people want to listen to Kenny Mason as well as the other tracks we like from this year, go to YouTube. No, go to Spotify and search Nostalgia Best of 2022, where we're updating the playlist every week with the songs we like. Are we gonna be putting many little baby songs off of "It's Only Me" on there? Because uh, listening to Ruffs and "It's Only Me" back to back was like night and day for me, I'd say.
Yeah, man. I'm not sure because Lil Baby, kind of a victory lap type album. At least that's kind of the vibe he gives off as the performer on this. And this is expected to sell 200,000 first week. Lil Baby is a massive artist at this point. Probably the second biggest Atlanta artist right now after Future. Like he is at the top. And kind of surprisingly, at least surprisingly when it happened, he has surpassed Migos as the number one artist on Quality Control. He's definitely bigger than hotter than those guys these days. Um, but this is actually his first solo album since the Breakthrough one in 2020. Um, My Turn, which of course really exploded and stood on the charts forever. Then had that deluxe that both was a complete streaming, juicing the streams grab, but also had the best songs on it. Like We Paid, like it has been quite interesting to watch like this little baby rise. And now we're at the point where it's like, all right, well, are the records here? Because Little Baby has a lot of popular songs, a lot of really good songs, and has definitely impressed me in the time since I first heard him, in like 2017, 2018 time. And now it's like, huh, well, what's next for Little Baby? Because he's at the top, he's super successful. What is there left to achieve? And it didn't come across to me like he had any grander ambition on It's Only Me, 23 song, 65-minute album. It just kind of felt like a lot of what Little Baby's up to, but he just seemed not as um, finely tuned, not as invested in the work this time around. There's moments for sure because I think his natural talent can just kind of ooze out of songs, but for like Little Baby is like at the top, let me maintain my status album. Why are the beats so bland and cheap sounding? Like this is such a polar opposite of like the Freddie Gibbs album we just got, which was so lush and loaded with A-list producers. There are big name producers on this Little Baby album, but these beats suck. And I think that's just a huge demerit because also Little Baby seems a little uninterested at times. And if the beats aren't helping you out either, like there's just a lot of stinkers.
Yeah. Yeah, I already wasn't really like a huge fan of Little Baby, so I guess I'll like caveat with like I wasn't going into this with a lot of expectation. But I did just feel like the album felt very similar, like track to track. It felt fairly low energy. And I gotta be honest, like I don't really like his voice already, and he doesn't do much here to like impress me outside of just being like a competent rapper. And I get that he's huge, like, and people love him, and maybe it's just like a taste thing for me, but I just found this to be quite a slog. It's interesting to like be looking through the track list here and seeing some of the collaborators.
Hmm.
Ellie Goulding on In a Minute. He's got
Oh yeah,
Ryan
well, that's the
Adams.
sample, of
Yeah,
course. The Drake Pound
he's
Cake sample all over again.
yep, and he like samples Ryan Adams a few songs later on "Cost to Be Alive." It's like he's like got some interesting like things here that I'm like, huh, like he's pulling from some inspiration that I wouldn't expect, but I don't feel like anything comes across here where I'm like, man, really inspired work on this.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. Like Little Baby's like biggest fans, and like if you a new book just came out this week, Rap Capital by Joe Coscarelli at the New York Times. It's about like the rise of Atlanta rap, and Little Baby's a huge part of this book, which I'm eager to read. People like Joe, people that are huge fans of Little Baby, like genuinely like critically like huge fans of his, would speak to like his vocal talent and how he can kind of like enunciate words in a certain way, and he can kind of uniquely communicate um kind of like witty like observations in his rapping style. And like I've tried to listen for it and I can hear it sometimes where it's like, yeah, there's a lot more under the hood with like his rapping ability than your average like Atlanta trap star. I agree with that. But I just think on this record it just felt a lot more low effort than, and I think that's another piece too. It's like his albums have always and mixtapes have always been bloated, but there's been like the brilliance tucked away, right? And I think this time it's still really bloated, and there's just like less examples of his like great talent, and therefore there's a lot less to recommend as a result. So I think for me, my favorite thing about it was probably Danger, just one of the random songs. There are many, but Danger. I think he had one of like I think a textbook like Little Baby Good line where he's like PTSD, I ain't sleep, so I don't got dreams. Like you know what? That's like the type of like street pain shit that he made his name on. That is like great lyrics from Little Baby, and I think the last song, the closer, Russian Roulette, him talking about trying to like slow his life down after finding all this success. I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. But so many of these other tracks are just so paint by numbers, and not that he can't do cliche. By all means, do it, but he's just not doing it that well, and therefore it's hard to recommend.
Um, I think for fans of him though, this isn't going to deter them. Like this is kind of just what he does, and
Mhm.
I don't think this is probably going to be any of their favorite albums, but uh, I don't think this is going to be like the best thing he ever makes either. So
Yeah,
I think this is just kind of like a throwaway almost for him, right?
I,
Like
I agree.
better days to come.
There was actually a quite a funny line to me, which was towards the beginning on California Breeze, where one of his bars is number one on YouTube. And I'm like, actually, no, you are not
Yeah,
number
no.
one on YouTube. NBA YoungBoy is number one on YouTube. You are number two usually on YouTube, my
Yeah,
guy.
I had the same thought when he said that. I was like, I don't know if that's accurate.
Yeah, God, YoungBoy still does like 50 million on YouTube every single week. The dude's insane. All those little
I,
kids who don't have money for streaming services.
Anyways, maybe we'll add a track from him to our Nostalgia Best of 2022 playlist. Let's keep it moving to an artist who I found their work a bit more interesting, even if them as a personality I find quite uh I don't know, controversial to say the least, quite
What album?
despicable.
What
I
an
don't
album rollout! What promo! You
Oh
couldn't
boy.
draw it up any better than M.I.A has this time around.
Yeah, I mean, so M.I.A, right? Like a very inventive artist, really blew up in the late 2000s. Paper Planes, maybe one of the top 10 songs of the 2000s.
Yeah, up there.
A complete banger. But and people really ride for a few of her albums, right?
The first two.
Kala,
Yeah.
Arular, probably the big hits. Aim, her most recent one before Mata, the one that was released this past Friday. Um, Probably her least successful to date, and took some time off from releasing albums. Was kind of on an every 3 year run until 2016. Now 6 years later, we get
Mm,
Mata,
mm.
and you know, I just feel like there's a lack of cohesion on the record. I still think there's some really interesting stuff, but just at times like fell a bit flat for me. And I think the best like example is KTP for this, right? Which is
Keep the
like,
peace.
yeah, is basically, I mean, it sounds like Maps, the song Maps, from, is it the
Maroon
AAIs,
Five.
I think? Yeah, no. No, not Maroon 5. Maps Way Out, They Don't Love You Like I Love You is the song I'm thinking of. But
Yeah,
it basically is Paper Planes, right? Like, but just like dulled down, like kind of
yeah.
took
You got
taking some of the
background
interesting
vocals
stuff.
again. The vibe is similar. Yeah.
And it just feels like that's kind of what we got in this album, like mid-tier MIA stuff, right? I don't know.
Y- She doesn't sound on her A game when it came to like the performance or the lyrical side of things, which
Oh
is,
no.
I guess not surprising. Like she is 47. She has been around a long time and has taken a long time off. And not that she has necessarily been out of the public eye. Again, she is keen to speak her mind on many an issue and topic, and you can look into that if you're interested. But it just doesn't seem like that's actually in the music. It's almost like the music, the lyrics are almost more broader and uh, surface level, and maybe that's a good thing given the type of opinions she's been sharing lately. Maybe it's better to be more agreeable with the music. I don't know, but
Well, her
it
opinions
just
certainly aren't very like well researched or deep, so it's not surprising that the
no.
lyrics
So
are.
if you're not getting that, then like I guess you really want like the production to wow you because her first two albums, especially at that time, her kind of coming into like the realm of early Diplo and really bringing to mainstream like this South Asian, like Tamil influenced sounds into music production and like making these honestly really unique, iconoclastic dance tracks. And we mentioned the Santa Gold album a few weeks back. I think of her in a very similar way. They're about the same age. They came up around the same time. And in the interim, like since early MIA to now, like music has moved forward, and there are people who've picked up this mantle from MIA. I think in some reviews I saw Rosalia mentioned often, and or even
Mm,
someone on the other end, like 100 Gex. Like you are getting these kind of like ideas with production elsewhere now, and MIA just doesn't really sound like as up to the challenge to like keep going in the
mm,
direction that she helped found, if that makes sense. And not that I think this is necessarily bad. There are some moments, I think more than anything, when she was doing like her like true hip hop, which is a big text trademark of her career, on a song like Zoo Girl or The One. I was like, actually, yeah, this is still like pretty solid hip hop. Again, like the lyrics aren't anything too special, but like her flow is like still pretty good. But just some of the other songs where like these don't do a whole lot for me, honestly. Like Marigolds, you have like these background vocals, and Lil Uzi Vert is
mhm.
among them. Apparently, I couldn't hear him, but he's there apparently. Um, but like I don't know, it's just I think the blandness kind of sets in a little bit, which is disappointing because like like she's not a bland artist. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely some like fun production songs, but even like some of my favorite like sounding songs, like Energy Freak really sounds out. Like MIA's like vocals on that just like don't match and they seem like kind of off, almost like she like had recorded the vocals and just like, ah, is there a song that I can just put these over? But they don't really feel totally inspired. Even Marigold, which I think is probably one of my favorite tracks off this, like the chorus is when times are different or when times are difficult, we're gonna need a miracle. It's like what? Like okay, like
Hmm.
you have in the past had such like inspired and like pretty like critical lyrics of like social commentary and now
Oh
you're
yeah,
like talking about how like ah we're in a difficult time so we're just gonna need something magical to save us like okay like
yeah.
cool
She,
and vaccines are the problem right like sorry didn't like we didn't need to go there but that's kind of been like the subtext of like where she's at right now it's
and that's the thing. She's been geopolitical with her music for years.
oh
Like
yeah
let's not forget she flips off the camera during her Super Bowl guest spot back in
hmm
the day. Like she's been about it, and it just didn't come across this time in the music. And like I said, maybe that was a good thing given what she's kind of on her mind these days. But unfortunately, it just comes across as a bit more generic than you'd expect from someone of her caliber with her discography to this point. So I had the M.I.A. album like listed on my like albums to look out for list for a while now, just because it's been a long time, 2016, and I was like, okay, MIA, like that's definitely one to pay attention to, right? Like it was only a few lists down, lines down from me from like Rihanna and Frank.
mm,
Like it was she's a pretty significant artist to be expecting an album from
yeah
for 6 years, and ultimately I think this is a huge letdown.
oh I completely agree and I was actually thinking like the Santa Gold album isn't one that I'm gonna necessarily go back to a lot but I'd prefer that album over this one for sure and
Yeah.
just even I think Santiago as an artist is someone that I find to be a little bit more intriguing. But um, you know, I hope better days are ahead for MIA because like you hear a song like Freedom is a State of Mind Part Two, which we didn't need a part two. You could have just made those one song, in my opinion, especially still the first part's like a minute 30 and the other part's like 2 minutes or three
Hmm.
minutes, whatever. But that like when part two comes in and she's just like screaming, freedom is a state of mind. Like I'm like, okay. And you have this like insane production behind it. I'm like, okay, this is like cool shit. And then it's followed by just like these like nonsensical lyrics for the most part. It's like,
Hmm.
there's just so much potential there that she just can't reach for whatever reason right now. And I wonder like who are her collaborators right now? Like who's working with her?
Beats me. This
Kanye?
this did come out on Island Records, so she's still on that's a subsidiary of Universal, so she's still like in the system. It seems. It's a new label for her too after the last album, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know because in theory you would think she could kind of fit in to all kinds of things. She was on that random Travis Scott song Franchise like 2 years ago, which became a big hit due to the Travis aspect of it. She can be a chameleon. I think she's good enough to do that.
Mhm.
Um, and hopefully down the line she has, I think, more compelling inspiration for her own work.
I just don't know if I want to hear what she has to say moving forward.
Yeah,
I don't know. Anyways, let's move forward to the saviors of rock, the 1975. Um, yeah, the last time we talked about them was 3 years now. Has it been
May
that long?
2020. Notes on a Conditional Form, album 4.
20. Yeah. Wow. I mean, it feels like forever ago, and not that long ago. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think from what I recall, we were like, yeah, 1975 for like what they are is really enjoyable, like non-offensive, like pop rock music, and like they lean into the 80s sound, and they have a very strong brand, but it's like enjoyable a lot of the time, and I think that's highlighted by a song like "Let Me Know," like, or is that what it's called, or maybe "I'd Like You Better If You Took Off Your Clothes," whatever that
Hmm.
song was called.
Uh,
Um,
Off the last record, there was, I think, a few highlights, such as
if you're
If You're
too
Too
shy,
Shy, Let Me Know,
yeah,
most
that's the one.
specifically. That was an album that was super long and super bloated and kind of like frustratingly all over the place. But like the best moments of it were like some of the best moments that you get from the 1975. And I think that's what made it kind of disappointing a little bit to me because it's like you guys are really circling around some really good stuff here, but this album's just kind of all over the place, right?
And so what do you
And
do, Dave? Who do you
what
get
do
to
you do?
help you hone your sound?
Yeah, how do you trim a track list down the way the 1975 just did? Well, you work with the only man for the job, and that would be Jack Antonoff, who was in the room for most of the recording of this. He's not listed as a producer on any of the beats, but he did all the arranging and did some instrument playing as well. Clearly was a creative collaborator with Maddie and the boys. Jack Antonoff, who would have thought that's all you needed to do? Because I think this is the best 1975 album.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I thought this was actually pretty great. A few stinkers, but a really enjoyable album. And yeah, this is like also maybe the most bleacher sounding 1975 album. So it makes sense that Jack Antonoff was all over this. I actually didn't realize that he had collaborated.
Me
I
neither.
listened first, and then I like started reading it, and I was like, this all makes a lot of sense. Like it sounded just like a Bleachers album for a lot of the parts, but it really worked. And they're corny and ridiculous, but
Hmm.
like man, they can make like a soft rock bop. And I really enjoy a few songs, including probably a top 10 song of the year for me to this point, which would be about you, which was
Mm-hmm.
my clear favorite from this.
Yeah, the
I just
lower
think that's
register for Maddie performing after you hear his usual range, and then he really brings it down with that one
uh,
too. It definitely jumped out right away.
and like that's like a Jack Antonoff like production, like chef's kiss, like everything that he does really well on the albums that we love from him, like Melodrama and Lover and things like
Hmm.
that. It's like it all just kind of comes like to fruition there, and you're like, man, he still has it sometimes, but he's just made so many boring albums with boring artists to this point, or not boring, but like
Yeah,
I don't know,
made other
uninspired
artists
albums, I
boring
guess.
lately. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really cool to see them both all kind of finding their form on this. What were the tracks that stood out to you?
Yeah, and I think that's what's so exciting about it too. It's like this is being funny in a foreign language. The fifth 1975 album is the 1975 really for the first time, kind of paring back and like focusing in on what kind of album they're trying to make. And as a result, the album is only 43 minutes, 11 songs. It like feels tighter because it is. And I just thought there were so many tracks that I just really digged because you're just not really distracted by, any like the jarring like production choices this time around where Maddie was like in the writing bag a little bit. Like this is really like his brand, like of these like ridiculous one-liners and funny things, or like these weird like rope-a-dope way he rhymes words together. Like it just sounded and felt so much like the essence of this band and this songwriter,
Mhm.
and it's just like the music's just better now, and
Yeah.
like I don't know, it's just exactly what I wanted. So there were a ton of songs that I really digged. Just I think just like the through line for me is just a lot of the melodies are just like really tight, and like the tempos are really fun, and like and Maddie, like he's not been one to be afraid to speak his mind. As people know, he is, and he talks about this on this record, I think, in a funny way too, about apologizing for some things he might have done or said, and referencing his past in funny ways. Like I just really enjoy him as a presence in music, as a frontman of a band, because I think he's like a really genuinely real and unique personality,
He's
and
a
it also
weirdo.
comes across in the music. Like,
Mhm.
and that, more than anything, that's why I like the band a lot these days. So yeah, I dug right off the jump. I loved Happiness.
Yeah, Happiness
Um,
is a
the
clear bop.
the melody there and like the guitars just kind of jamming out sounds great.
Man, the
Looking for
bass on that song is so plucky. It's like really fun.
exactly. Yeah, right after that, looking for somebody to love. Just
Mhm.
super groovy there. My favorite song probably would be the next one, Part of the Band. Just the way like the strings are just kind of like strumming along. I think his one-liners on that song are super funny. Um, and then it
Part
kind of
of the
has this like
band,
saxophone outro too, which is like super subdued and
yeah.
cool. But like there were moments of saxophone on the last record, and they clearly like noticed people like that. I certainly did. And like, you know what? Let's get more sax on this new one. And it's like really stood out to
Oh
me.
yeah. Well, yeah. Jack Antonoff loves the sax. Like if you listen to his last album, it was all over the place. Uh, yeah. Part of the band, his like the way he like sings, like talks. I can't quite pinpoint it, but it feels so familiar. There's almost like a Paul Simon feel to it in a
Mm,
sense, Like I don't know, like I can't quite put it like a. You Can Call Me Al maybe is the song that it brings to mind for me. But yeah, I thought that was a great track. Actually, I think that run, Happiness, Looking for Somebody to Love, and Part of the Band is probably my favorite like run of the album. But
hmm
I also really like the second half where we get like Wintering.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a great track. Just a lot of fun. And then Human 2, which is a little cheesy for me, but I think is also still a strong song. And then obviously leading into About You. Um, I think those three really stood out to me as strong songs as well. And then there's a couple in the middle I really liked, like Oh Caroline's another
hmm
really strong track for them. The album just totally works. It's really a pleasure to listen to, and I really recommend this one with some really like strong headphones. Which I mean, you should listen to every album that you really like with good
hmm
headphones. But you can really hear the texturing and the layering in
hmm
this, and it's like you just immediately want to like start dancing and like just like you're in it. So it's
Yeah.
it's cool.
I've started to like plan my like weekends around like doing my album listening specifically in the car because I'm like, I just really want to hear this in the car versus listen to it in like at home.
Yeah.
And like I had a really fun time just like driving around to this album and like pulling out my phone and trying to write stuff down without crashing my car, you know. Great stuff. Yeah, I think Oh Caroline is really fun too because it's like Leo DiCaprio meme points 80s song. We found it.
Yeah. um Yeah, it would almost be remiss to not talk about "I'm in Love with You" because I think that might be my favorite like chorus on it, and it's so
hmm
simple, but just the "I'm in love with you," it's just like, oh yeah, let's fucking go. I mean,
Yeah,
the
groovy again.
1975, yeah, they're cheesy, they're corny, they're ridiculous, but they're just so themselves. It's like hard, I think, not to just like enjoy them, and if you just like accept them for being, like this like pop rock, like soft 80s band that's not
hmm
never gonna like they're not the saviors of rock. We already
No.
established that that's Greta Van Fleet, and and if you can accept that they're just like this really competent pop rock band at this point, I think you can enjoy them. But
Yeah.
there's so much more than that 'cause it's almost reductive to say like
I think
They're
so.
they're
Yeah.
not Maroon 5. They're so much better and so
No.
much more
And I
talented.
think if anything, like who even compares in the pop rock mold these days? I don't even know because I think like they
Good
have such a
question.
clear identity, and this is an album where they really focus that, as we've been saying, in a really compelling manner, and that's what makes this one so exciting to me. Um, I'm not
I
really
mean,
sure who their true peers are right now.
I think the peer is Jack Antonoff, right? It's the
I guess
Bleachers might be up there, but they're not to the same level.
no,
Like,
1975 is also quite significantly popular too.
yeah,
Um, I think Wintering is you mentioned is a really good one. The tempo there, the one-liners there are so funny too. Like the woman, you are 64 years old. That's about his mom over
yeah,
something he said. Like that is so funny. And like there's a lot of like great moments, man. Like I
hmm
really enjoy Maddie's humor, the way it comes out in his music. And even the closer, when we are together, the Central Park is SeaWorld for Trees line, like completely nonsense, right? But it's also just so funny to hear it from him. You know,
yeah.
like he can sell it like nobody else. Um,
Just want to throw this out there just to hear your thoughts. Is there like closest peer Harry Styles in terms of like sound
no,
and like no?
they have way more musical identity to me than Harry. Harry's a lot
Yeah,
grander than these guys.
that's
Let's give
true.
them credit. You know,
Yeah, yeah. You
maybe
might be
down the
right. They
line,
might be
Harry will go
singular.
down this road. You could see it, but right now, I would say no way.
Man, I mean, if Harry goes down this road and we actually get like a good Harry album, that'd be great.
Right? Imagine who
Imagine.
among us?
Yeah. Anyways, check out our Nostalgia Best of 2022 playlist on Spotify, where I'm sure we'll have at least one
Yeah.
1975 song on there. But Dave, let's talk about a movie that came out this weekend that we both were able to check out. Triangle of Sadness. Uh, yeah, this is a movie that I think was good, but also feels so familiar to things we've been watching a lot
Hmm.
that it was hard to watch it and not compare it to some of the TV peers specifically for me. And I think it because of that, I found myself feeling like it didn't quite hit the same way something like White Lotus did. That made me ding it just a little bit. But did you have the same experience watching this?
So I really enjoyed watching Triangle of Sadness in the theater just because pretty good group in there, and the humor was like really hitting with
hmm
in my theater. Like I was really dying in Act Two towards the end of the yacht stuff. Like
hmm
it was fun. So like I think a lot of like the satirical black comedy nature to Triangle of Sadness is definitely familiar. The commentary is largely out in the open and easy to grasp and maybe obvious, at times. Totally agree. But I honestly just really enjoyed this and honestly had a blast watching it, and just kind of laughing along at many of these fools that we were watching on screen. Like, um, yeah, White Lotus vibes for sure. But honestly, it's Ruben Östlund's thing, you know? Ruben Östlund, Swedish director, he's quite prolific, but this is his now second movie in a row to win the Palme d'Or at Cannes after 2017's The Square. He also made Force Majeure a few years before that. This has kind of been his thing of late, which is the lampooning of rich people and um, kind of satirizing their lives and kind of imbuing his personal politics and thoughts about society into his films. So like this has definitely been his thing for a while, and whether this is as successful as his other work, perhaps remains to be seen. Depends on the viewer. But yeah, I think there's still a lot of merit to it, even if a lot of it is familiar.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a fun time, and I definitely think there's some really strong performances and some strong commentary. I was really struck by the way that the first act, which explores the relationship of Carl and Yaya, played by Harris Dickinson and Sharibi Dean,
Charlie Dean. Yeah.
Charabi Dean, sorry, Yaya,
Yeah.
respectively, and their dynamic is like this beautiful couple who one is an aspiring model, the other one's a very successful model, and they kind of talk about like gender dynamics
Hmm.
and about
Yeah.
like financial expectations within relationships, and also like I think just how modern relationships kind of interact in terms of like communication style, which I think is all really interesting when it gets flipped on its head in the third act, right? They're on the
Mhm.
when they're on the island, lampooned, and uh, Carl kind of becomes the love interest of is it Abigail? Is that the main person?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
Abigail,
Abigail.
Dolly
and
De Leon.
and how like all of these like dynamics are just like kind of flipped on their
Hmm.
head, and
Yeah,
I think it's really fascinating to see how he does that, and it really hits for me. I think some of the like rich people like lampooning, and like they're like eh, was a bit on the nose, right? So it's like
hmm.
the guy, one of the guys on the boat is rich from creating the hand grenade. And I was
Yeah,
like, okay, like this is, it's funny, but it's also like very like okay, like
yeah.
I don't know.
You
It could
know,
have been maybe a
the
little
UN stopped their
higher.
previous bestseller, The Landmine. Those pesky fucks.
Yeah. So I think some of that stuff didn't totally hit, and also like I feel like Woody Harrelson is like almost like stunt casting in a sense, you know, with him like coming out for like what 10 minutes of the movie, and then
Right. Yeah.
but
So as you said, there's like these three distinct like named acts, right? Our introduction to Carl and Yaya and like this modeling world, and some actually I think some pretty fun like satirization of the modeling world too. You know, like that first scene where we're introduced to
yeah,
Carl when he's in the room with all the other model men. Like I thought that was quite funny too. And then you mentioned the restaurant scene, which I think really works. And then the second act is when Carl and Yaya go on this like high-end luxury cruise
hmm,
that they got to go on for free because Yaya's an influencer, but they're joined by all these like legitimately like 1% wealthy types, right? And then of course Act Three, you know, spoilers, when the hijinks ensue, they're no longer on the yacht; they are on an island. Some of them, anyway, right? These three
hmm,
distinct acts, but I think they all serve like three distinct purposes. And I think you're right. Act Two is probably the least high-minded of the three acts in terms of what it's saying. Like it's just obviously like rich people suck. Let's laugh at them, and
yeah,
I totally acknowledge that. But I also had a really fun time laughing at them throughout that. Like especially like once it like things really get out of hand, and the balance of the ship starts to be jeopardized, and people are falling over constantly, and then they start puking. Like a lot of the body humor I was dying with, and there were people in my theater that just started laughing too, and I just had a really great time just watching these like people I had some disdain for just go through the roughest of times. You're right though about Woody Harrelson. I think his like captain of the ship figure is a bit unfocused, where it's like that's
mhm,
probably supposed to be the voice piece, the mouthpiece for Ruben Ostlund's politics and views on capitalism versus Marxism. The Woody captain character is like a valid like Marxist, right? And it is pretty funny watching him chop it up with the Russian dude, and they both just kind of like espouse these decrees on like politics and society with the microphone, the intercom of the ship, and just everyone else is a captive audience as the boat almost
mhm,
flips. Like that was like really funny to me, but it's not actually really communicating like a whole lot, like thematically. Like you kind of get it there,
yep,
but I was still having a good time with that. But yeah, I didn't really know there was going to be a third act to that. It's actually really funny. I went to the movie thinking it was 90 minutes long, not 2.5 hours move. So I was looking at my like phone and I was like, oh, it's about time. And then I see Act Three and they're on the island. I'm like, holy shit, the movie's still going. This is so cool. And that one really like took me for a loop. And I think that's perhaps the best group of them all, as you said, when they flip the relationship between Carl and Yaya on its head, and Dolly De Leon really comes into her own in the film as
yeah,
Abigail. But also, you get to really like laugh at these people too once you realize the true nature of their new circumstances on this island that you find out at the very end. Like, so yeah, I think it's not as probably successful in its comment as the Square, but I still had a really good time because these politics are similar to my own.
yeah. I did like some of the stuff on the boat with like the rich person who was like the sails were dirty, and Woody Harrelson's like, well, this is a motorized boat, so we don't have sails. Like, it's like, no, there were sails. Like it was that I thought that was pretty good.
Woody
I
having
def
hamburgers. Like, I don't like hide fine dining.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Yeah, there's definitely some funny stuff throughout. I thought this was an enjoyable movie. I think it's just so hard because, and going back to my framing of this was, we've had a lot of TV shows specifically who have been kind of doing this, like taking rich people and powerful people and really like breaking down how terrible they are and
Mm,
how insensitive they are. And I think it's hard when you've had something like The White Lotus, which is so successful at it in so many ways. Um, to like then see this and not
yeah,
think of it. But I definitely think this is more humorous to me than The White Lotus, and
yeah,
I think this is a fun little romp. If we, I guess it is not so little at 140 minutes, but definitely
yeah.
enjoyable for
Yep,
sure.
I agree. Yeah, so like this just came out after winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes out via Neon, and tragically, this is the last film from Charlie B. Dean, who like suddenly tragically passed away at the end of August unexpectedly. I actually thought she was quite good
Mhm.
as Yaya. I really enjoyed her dynamic with Harris Dickinson. The Carl and
Yeah,
Yaya relationship was quite fun, honestly. Like,
I agree.
yeah, and like, yeah, like, does the movie do like kind of the obvious thing where it's like, hey, look, she's an influencer, she's taking a picture, eating food, but oh, she's not actually eating it in real life. Look at that, you know? It's like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
like you kind of like know what the scene's gonna be before it actually happens. We get the joke, get the comment, fine. But I thought they were both really good.
Yeah, no, I agree. The two leads definitely were strong, and overall, Triangle of Sadness, I think a movie we would recommend. So check that out. But Dave, you're flying solo on Tar, the new Kate Blanchett vehicle that just came out. I hear she's pretty great in it.
Yeah, so Kate Blanchett is superb in Tar. Just say it right now. Kate Blanchett, always good, never bad. People know this, but this is definitely up there as one of her best performances. And Tar, I think, is a really fantastic film, really unique movie, highest possible recommendation. Definitely see it. This had a Venice premiere, just started coming out in limited release, and it's the first feature film in 16 years from Todd Field. Todd Field's only his third movie, his first since 2006. Of course, Todd Field came up as an actor, was in Eyes Wide Shut, grew very close to Kubrick before Kubrick passed, became a director. His first film, Best Picture nominated, screenplay nominated, second film, screenplay nominated. Here we are, his third film. He has like been completely out of the public eye for 16 years. We knew he was doing stuff. At one point, he was developing a Daniel Craig Showtime series that apparently he completely wrote and they never made. Alas, he's finally back and actually talking to people again. And he came back to make Tar, and it's just so brilliant. And I think what's really cool about this movie is that right off the bat, I think it just throws you in a really smart way to learning who is this Lydia Tarr character played by Kate Blanchett, and you actually see Tarr sitting on stage talking to Adam Gopnik of the New Yorker, playing himself, and we learn that we're actually at a New Yorker festival event in New York City, and Adam Gopnik just kind of goes over the biography of Lydia Tarr, telling us how she's an EGOT and she's like one of the few people to be a conductor for all the big five famous orchestras in the world. Lydia Tarr is like one of the best composers in the world, and currently, where Tarr starts the film, Lydia is the conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic in Germany, and you just, I think, get really thrown in right away to what feels like a completely realized character and world, and it comes across as a biopic, but it's completely fictional, and it's awesome. And then you just kind of you watch this movie, and you get into what actually Todd Field's actually about with this movie, and what like the themes are. And it's a long movie, 2 hours 40 minutes, so it takes a while to get there, but it's not like it doesn't feel long at all. Like this movie really makes you think, quite thought provoking, and once the gears start to shift, once things aren't quite right, and things start to change in Lydia's life, like I think it just really gets to you. It's a movie broadly about like the art versus the artist, and cancel culture, and just broadly like narcissism and ego and art and in life in general, and just the way that the story progresses through those themes. You know, when you hear a movie about cancel culture, most people's like, they recoil at that thought. Like, we don't want to, no one wants that these days, right? It's a never ending topic. But this is a movie that's so thoughtful and intelligent about how it tackles something like this. And it also, because it's a longer movie, really puts in the time to establish these real life themes and make them make sense with this character and with this narrative. Like, I think everything really works. It's just really triumphant film. And yeah, like like I said, thought provoking. Like, you don't necessarily know how you feel about things by the end, because you're spending so much time with this Lydia Tarr character, and Kate Blanchett is just so commanding in the role as this very confident, capable, larger than life character in our story. And then just seeing these things that happen, changing how you feel about what you've seen. It's all done really well. In a supporting role, you have Naomi Merlant from Portrait of a Lady on Fire, the French actress. She's Lydia's like assistant character. Smaller roles, you have Mark Strong, and of course the great Julian Glover as well. And then a bunch of other European actors as well. Yeah, highest possible recommendation for me. I think it's a really thought-provoking movie. It's not really a movie about music composition. It's not really about music. It's more about the uh, more higher minded, like societal things. That being said, early on, it's established that Lydia is kind of like a protege of Bernstein. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, of course, watch Maestro next year with Bradley Cooper about Leonard Bernstein. But yeah, I mean, this is, I think, just a really triumphant, really impressive, unique movie that you need to watch.
I definitely can't wait to check it out. Wish I'd had time to get to it, but definitely one that I'm gonna prioritize whenever I can. Check it out. Dave doesn't usually say his highest possible recommendation, so it's a sign of a really good movie right there. Dave, we're gonna switch from the big screen to the small screen, where I know you're gonna give She-Hulk your highest recommendation to watch as well, right?
Third favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe television series. There, I said it. Pretty
Put
good,
put that
relatively
on the
speaking.
billboard. um, yeah, She-Hulk felt like there was potential for it to be one of the standout Marvel shows because it was really committing to a tone, right? Like even from the first episode, um, there was a silliness to it. There was a tongue-in-cheek feel to it, and there was also this, courtroom drama uh, promise that this was not going to turn into,
Mhm.
a CGI fuck fest, as
Yeah,
people like to say.
legal comedy. Yeah.
Yeah, and it already is a bit of a CGI fuck fest just by the fact that you cannot actually make Jennifer Walters big and green, so you just need to CGI all the time whenever she is She-Hulk.
Hmm.
But I think for all of the criticism about the CGI and all that coming in, I think She-Hulk was actually pretty successful, and I really left liking Tatiana Maslany quite a bit. I think
Hmm.
she played this role really well. I thought this was actually a really introspective uh, and reflective movie of where Marvel's at right now in terms of like
Hmm.
grappling with its identity of uh, who it was and who it is now, and um, some of it worked, some of it I think wasn't quite as good as other parts, but overall I left really satisfied. Give me your like favorite parts of She-Hulk, and then let's talk about some of the things we didn't like so much.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really spot on. The reason I have She-Hulk as like my number three after Loki and WandaVision, I think She-Hulk's kind of like clearly for me in like a tier of its own when you're ranking these MCU shows
Mm,
we've got. And I think like you said, it's because of the tone. The tone is not only committed to, but it's good. It works. Like, this is actually, like, I think the Marvel brand done quite well, where it's
mm,
light, it's quippy, it's fun, and yet, because the show is framed more often than not, but of course not always, as this kind of like legal comedy. Jessica Walters is a lawyer still, even though she's She-Hulk. That's our framing device. Because it's framed in something like that, is inherently more silly or at least smaller stakes at all times. it just felt like it could be itself, which was just kind of this witty, funny stuff. That
Mhm,
being said, I think why the show kind of transcends a little bit above that is because it's not afraid to ruminate on like women's place in society and how they are treated, things like
mhm,
that. You know, obviously the show doesn't always get into that. There are episodes where that kind of talk is more prevalent than others, but given the MCU masters of it all, I think it's pretty successful and about as good as Marvel can do at kind of imbuing like more broad, higher level like commentary into one of their stories. And I
mhm.
really appreciate that about it. Also, I really couldn't help but be charmed by the way the series ends with that finale. Obviously, we know going in that She-Hulk breaks the fourth wall. They started off in the premiere, but that's obviously well established in the comics that She-Hulk was basically Deadpool before Deadpool. We know that,
Mhm.
and it's still up and down and inconsistent across the series. But I think there are some great moments, such as the finale, where it's done to a really amazing effect and just gives She-Hulk a kind of unique identity when thought of against its MCU series peers. So obviously there's things that are more down than up, but I really enjoyed my time with it.
One of the biggest surprises, or before we even get to that, I think one of my favorite parts of it was the supporting cast, right? And now I can tie this in. One of the biggest surprises to me was just how much Tim Roth was involved with this,
Mm,
in I think 3 or 4 episodes in total. And I think his turn as Emil Blonsky, Abomination. Obviously, I think he's reprising a role
yeah,
from one of the earlier Hulk movies, right? If I'm
Incredible Hulk. He
remembering.
hasn't
Yeah.
done this since 2008. Been a while.
I think when like the episode where she goes and she's kind of stuck there because her car gets ruined by one of the
Right.
guys. I think that's
No
probably one
cell
of my favorite.
signal. All that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of my favorite episodes of the whole thing. Not only in terms of the like mindfulness and like mental health aspect that's brought into it, obviously for me, but I think the like way that it takes characters who like bringing back the guy from the first episode who tried to like beat her up and like really like allows them to like redeem themselves and like kind of like frame that like yeah, like people can be shitty, but like that doesn't mean that you have to like always paint them that way. There is a chance for redemption. I think that some of those themes really like stood out. And as you move towards the finale, I think that made some of the themes of Jessica Walters, her downfall, her return to I don't know, promise or acceptance in society all feel a little bit more earned. And of course, uh, I'm kind of going off into the Emil side of things, and he's kind of a bit character. I really loved Nikki and Pug, man, as her like two sidekicks. Pug
Hmm.
was hilarious, and Nikki, played by Ginger Gonzaga, was just fantastic. I really enjoyed her presence on the show. Really brought some levity.
Yeah. How'd you like Jamila Jamil as Tatiana? Kind of like a
Wasted.
influencer, super powered character. Definitely an intriguing concept, I guess. And I think the show probably could have done something a bit more interesting with that than what they ended up doing.
I felt like she was completely wasted, honestly. And even in the finale, you kind of get all these characters wrapped up, but Titania isn't really touched on at all. She pops in and Jennifer Walters like, and Titania's here, and then she's like, okay, now we have to go and like talk
Hmm.
to Kevin, and like just
Yeah.
it just kind of forgotten. So I feel like they never really figured that aspect out of the show.
But see, the way the show ends, though, with being like, actually, most of the plot doesn't matter, to me, that's amazing. Like,
Yes.
there are like 30 Marvel movies. We're on like show 6 or 7 at this point. It's fine. Do
Yeah.
something funny and different.
Completely agree.
Pretty great, especially because you have the ability to do this with the She-Hulk fourth wall breaking. Like,
Mhm.
because like no one's like sitting on the edge of their seat waiting to see the Titania story resolve. It
Oh
doesn't
no.
matter. So do something that's way better than the Titania story could have ever been, which was this. You know,
I think
like the
it's just
stuff
like
with
why
Kevin,
get
like this open like mocking of Marvel writers room and like Feige like hi
Mhm.
being the overlord of all things, and like Kevin saying like, oh, but we have to bring in Ruffalo because we were introduce blah 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 to set up so and so, and then you
Yeah,
just have Walters be like, nah, save it for the movie. Like that's so great. Like she's just
yeah.
literally, it's just so funny.
No, I thought that was great. I think I just almost feel sad that it was Jamila Jamil in this role, right? Just
Yeah,
because she's so talented. It's like I just wanted to see her have a little bit more to do. I would have actually almost liked her to be the like opposing lawyer who she befriends. I forgot her name. Um uh
not Daredevil, right?
Oh, no, no, no. Well, obviously we should talk about that real quick, but no, the other lawyer in the office who she's like rivals with and then defends her in the
Right. Oh,
um
that's right. Yeah, I forgot her
against
name.
Titania. But yeah, anyways, I think that's really not that big of a dent against the success of the show. Tell me about your thoughts on Daredevil being in this.
Yeah, so he's in the last two episodes. Obviously, on its surface, makes sense. Matt Murdock is a lawyer, so easy tie in there. But you know what? Charlie Cox definitely felt like how he used to be on the Marvel Netflix Daredevil series. Didn't seem any different to me, and I actually really liked that dynamic that those two had together. The fact they hooked up, I think, is amazing. That was really fun, and seeing
Yep.
Daredevil walking home, doing the
Walk of
classic one
shame.
night stand walk when with his shoes off, hilarious. You know, that sounds great. I'm not would not be shocked if we see She-Hulk pop up in that Daredevil series coming out in
Yeah.
2024. Given they announced that that's an 18 episode series, surely they have room for that. Yeah, I thought he was pretty fun. I also thought Wong uh, was
Yeah.
pretty fun as well early on, just because Benedict Wong can really do like the humor of his character
Mhm.
well, and those were really funny episodes, man. And Wong was great, and actually having him kind of interface with Emil as well later on, I thought was quite fun. So like the Marvel like tie-ins and connections, insignificant, but actually done pretty well and enjoyable in this series. It didn't feel like the MCU was breathing down She-Hulk's neck.
Yeah, I agree. It was really funny to me when Tatiana as Jennifer Walters is like, Wong's in this episode again. It's almost like a cheat code, or however she said it. Like, who doesn't enjoy Wong being here? Also, I just want to clean this up. I was the person I was thinking of was Mallory, who was played by Renee Elise
Elise
Goldsberry.
Goldsberry.
So,
Yep.
uh, who's fantastic. So just shout out
Yeah.
to her. Um, yeah, I think overall, just want to see more of this sort of stuff from Marvel. What's the next Marvel show? Is it the teenage one?
The next show is until early next year, which would be Secret Invasion.
Mm,
So we really have no indication of where She-Hulk will be next. Probably Daredevil, honestly. You know, they
yep.
kind of really quickly introduce Bruce Banner son, Hulk son, Scar.
Scar.
I would not be shocked if a She-Hulk and Scar film is in the works. Of course, as we know, the Hulk, Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner Hulk film rights are murky with Universal's involvement still. We don't know when that expires exactly, but I wonder if She-Hulk and Scar is a way to skirt that for Marvel Studios. I'm not sure. Who knows? Um, Also, I think just one kind of note I had about this the series was Tatiana Maslany having romance issues and dating troubles, completely uncredible. Obviously, she's a
I
beautiful
mean,
woman.
yeah, that's like a critique you can make for any show.
Yep.
Basically, they're always beautiful people. So yeah, but I mean, I liked when she was in like the clothes that were like 5 times her size when she like unhulked and she's just wearing like men's XXXXL like
Yeah.
clothes. I just always loved seeing that. That was funny. Yeah, the show was a delight, and you don't get to say that a lot about Marvel shows, so I'm happy for them. Um, Dave, I think we should move on though to the show we've been waiting to talk about. We texted a little bit before. Um, we talked this week. The Rings of Power wrapped up, man. I mean, 8 episode first season. We now know who Sauron was, and it's not who we thought. Um,
Who among us isn't
yeah,
Sauron, right?
yeah. We all have a little Sauron in us, right? Um, yeah. I mean, maybe we'll just start with the simple question: do you think the Rings of Power season one was successful in doing what
Hell
it needed
yeah.
to
Hell yeah. I love this show, man. I thought this was a great fun, and I really am intrigued for what's to come. I'm even more excited for season 2, given what we've got. Are there hiccups? Are there less effective things in the Rings of Power season 1? Yes, definitely. It's not perfect, but I think largely where it gets to, what it does accomplish, is successful, and I think a great place to leave off a season and start a new season. And yeah, I just really enjoyed being in the world of Middle Earth once again, being with many characters I know, some I don't know. Yeah, I just had a great time, and really can't wait for the next one. Apparently, actually, I was mistaken last time around. They really weren't that deep into season two. They've only just started production earlier this
Mm.
year, or sorry, earlier this month in the UK, actually, not New Zealand right now. So I don't know if we're going to get this show back next year. It might not be till 2024, but it'll be eagerly anticipated by me because I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I thought the show was a lot of fun as well. I really I think enjoyed the way that the characters grew on me. I think that there was a part of me that around like episode like 3 or 4 was like, there hasn't been a lot of like movement here. Like I felt like there wasn't like significant movement in the story. We spent a lot of time with Durin, with Galadriel, kind of like working out their friendship. You have you have uh I'm forgetting his name. The guy who ends up being Sauron. Sorry,
Halbrand.
Halbrand. Sorry, yeah. Now I'm just thinking about him as Sauron and Galadriel, and like them kind of figuring out their relationship
Yep.
and
In Numenor for
being
a long time.
yeah in Numenor as prisoners. And I'm like, like where is this really all going? But then I feel like it really pays off in the second half of the season. You get like the moment between um, Elrond and Durin when Elrond is like, I didn't realize I was put on this mission, but for this reason, but this is why I was put on this mission, and I need you to like help me save the elves, like the
Yeah.
our entire race. And like that moment between them is you're just like on the edge of your seat, like is he actually gonna go for this, or is he gonna like turn him away? And like I felt
Hmm.
like that was so powerful and strong. I feel like the payoff that leads up to episode 6 when everything comes together in the battle of Middle Earth there is just
Yep.
completely like maybe one of
Great.
the best episodes of TV of the year in my opinion. Just an amazing cat, like the way that they shot that and like edited it all
Yeah.
together.
Set piece
It's
after
just
set piece in the Southlands.
so good. Um, and then I really like how we got to the rings, and probably
Hmm.
my least favorite storyline, which is the Harfoots, I think had some of the like strongest emotional impact on me at the end of the season. So I was just
Yeah.
like overall found it to be a really successful season. I do agree with some of the critiques about like some of the writing, especially around like making sense of Halbrand's actions if he knows he's Sauron or is like aware of it. I think that there's some like
Sauron is a
motivation
deceiver,
questions.
baby.
Yeah,
I agree. It
maybe.
could have been communicated, I think, a little bit better. It's a bit of a challenge. For me, I'm willing to let it slide and I think see season two kind of color that in a little bit more. Um, because yeah, the way a lot of it's framed is you're putting a lot of onus on Galadriel, which doesn't seem right in terms of
Mhm.
our understanding of these two characters, right? So I agree. It is a weaker piece of the season, but I'm willing to let it go. Um, yeah, I think that's another piece about this too. Is like the Rings of Power. Yes, Second Age. Before Lord of the Rings, but like ultimately, we know everything that's going to happen. We know the fate of anyone we've met before. This is all known. Elendil, Isildur, Galadriel, Durin, Elrond. We know these people.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, you probably noticed the Southlands is going to become Mordor. You know what? That big mountain in the back, that's probably Mount Doom. Shocker, right? It's like I'm kind of happy we got past a lot of these like mysteries or like surprises because ultimately they really can't be surprises. And I
Mhm.
don't think Lord of the Rings needs to be told as a story in a way that's mystery boxy. You know, Tolkien storytelling, fantasy storytelling is not like Game of Thrones. It's much more earnest and I think of a different tone, right? And the Harfoots slash hobbits are a huge factor in that, right? If we can honestly just not worry about plot so much and actually just be with the characters, I think that's where this show can really shine. Because we know what's going to happen to everyone anyway. So why bother trying to like go down these like what ifs, with plot, right? Like, oh, yes, in Numenor, We know that they have the Palantir, the Seeing Stone. We know that's what was discovered under the blanket. Like there's no
Hmm.
surprise with any of this. Nor does there need to be. I don't need any surprise at all. I just want to be in the world and be with the characters, some of which I know, like so I'm hopeful for the the future of the series with Sauron's identity more in the open, the stranger confirmed at least to be an Astari of some kind. He is one of the wizards. Most people
Yeah,
think it's
is he
Gandalf.
gonna be
Doesn't have to be.
Gandalf?
It seems like he's Gandalf. He doesn't have to be Gandalf. He could be. I mentioned in our review of the first two episodes the Blue Wizard characters, which are largely undefined in Tolkien. Maybe he's one of those guys because that could just be a new character for all intents and purposes. I don't know. But yeah, he's one of the wizards for sure.
Hmm.
That is confirmed. Um, yeah, no sense hiding stuff. I think with this show, let's just get into it, and have a
Yeah.
good time.
No, yeah, and I think a very um satisfying season in my opinion. I mean, like we talked about some of the questions. I think maybe will answer themselves as we move forward, but it- I think getting a lot of the answers before the end of the first season is really exciting, and I think you kind of see where this is going. I'm really excited to see where the Harfoots with the stranger. I think that's going to be a
Mhm.
really fun storyline to follow. I think I'm interested to see what actually happens with the rings next. And how
Mhm.
that's all going to play out with the dwarves. I think that's going to be a really interesting dynamic politically. And then we had the king of Numenor. I forgot his name, who dies at the end of
Yes.
this episode. And I think there's going to be obviously some changes come with that. So some really interesting plot lines to be following moving forward.
Right. And I think that's actually one of the most intriguing ones too. Is like you can look up what happens to Numenor if you don't already know.
Hmm.
But that's about all we do know. Is more or less what happens. We don't know how it gets there. That'll be fun to spend time with.
Yeah.
The Harfoots. I think the Harfoot story was a bit up and down for me in
Hmm.
season one, but I still need the Harfoots in the show because those figures, the hobbits, the Harfoots, are central to Tolkien in terms of
Yeah.
little unimposing people being in this larger fantasy world. Like you said, the
Everyone
emotional beats
matters.
are there. Yeah, exactly. Like huge important component. What happens with Nori and the Stranger? Happy to see it happen. That'll be
Hmm.
great. Um, Another mystery they got out of the way. Not a mystery to most, I'm sure, but like in Causes of Doom, they found the mithril, but they dug too deep. Obviously, we know they dug too deep. If you've watched The Fellowship of the Ring, the Balrog is called Durin's Bane. You know what happens,
Hmm.
but we love Durin. He's
Yep.
so good. Him and Elrond's relationship is amazing. Robert Aramayo is
Yeah.
amazing as Elrond. I want to see that constantly. Let's go, man. They are great, and that'll be great. Obviously, we know the plot down the line, but I don't care about that. It's just because the characters are so good, you know.
Uh,
Um,
how'd you feel about Galadriel throughout the season?
yeah, I think in a sense she was a bit of a open book at this time. Young Galadriel, really not anything defined, so
Hmm.
didn't really know what to expect. And she's definitely has like a steely resolve, a focused direction, purpose in her life, and I don't want to call her one note. I think Morphy Clark is really good as Galadriel, but like I think seeing Galadriel in I think some new situations in season two will probably make the character even stronger on the
Hmm.
series. So I think ultimately she does kind of get like tied up in a lot of like the Numenor stuff where she doesn't get to do a whole lot, or at least not her herself. Um, so yeah, I'm definitely open to seeing more new things for Galadriel in the future, and I'm sure we'll get that. Of course, she's the co-lead with Elrond, really the number one lead of the series. I think the thing that for me most disappointed me about the whole series, which you mentioned as something that's intriguing to follow, right? The rings, right?
Right.
We kind of whipped right into Celebrimbor and Sauron getting into ring making at the end there. I wanted to see Sauron in a Region for so much longer than we ended up getting,
Hmm.
because that's a huge thing, right? About like Sauron kind of like deceptively influencing the elves and Celebrimbor into making the rings in the first place, right? And I would love to see more of that. We didn't really get a whole lot of it. Before you know it, Sauron's already out of Eregion and it's over.
Ha-
Um,
Had you
yeah.
figured out that he was Sauron before he revealed it?
As well, so a lot of people had been theorizing this for weeks and weeks, and there were like some like dialogue hints. I wasn't really interested in trying to figure it out, but also I was like, you know what? Maybe that's too easy. Maybe he's going to be the Witch King or a Nazgul or who knows, or he's somebody new. I don't know. I wasn't really
Mhm.
thinking about it too much, but as soon as I saw Halbrand kind of like pacing in the ring lab talking to Celebrimbor, I'm like, up, yep,
There we
confirmed.
go.
It's him. No more doubt.
Yeah.
Especially because right along that time, you have these like cultist characters, which I think are pretty weak villains. You have them being like, "Stranger, you are Sauron. Be our leader." You know, it's like, okay, well, clearly they're doing this because he's not Sauron. You know, like
Are you
at
talking
that point, I was
about
like, okay, it's pretty clear.
Adar as an Aruk?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I I actually found him to be a pretty intriguing character, Adar. I think he was played a very like menacing villain.
Hmm.
Um, I
Looks
I'm
cool.
in, and I really watching his interaction with Halbrand. When they capture him and thinking about the fact that Halbrand, knocks him off the horse or knocks the horse down, so he falls down. They stop him from getting the
Hmm.
top of the scepter or whatever it is.
Yep,
Um,
the dark elf figure here.
yeah, I thought was pretty like interesting to think about in retrospect. How he's like, "Do you remember me? Like, do you know who I am?" Like, I thought that was like a really fascinating scene to think about in retrospect, and I wonder if they're going to now obviously team up. I mean, this seems like there's
Hmm.
some sort of movement. I think like the one thing I'm a little like sad about is like, what is there really for us to follow with Sauron now that he's just kind of like, yeah, I'm bad now. Like
Yeah,
he
great.
just kind of sidelined.
Great question. So I think ultimately we're going to see him like be able to make the One Ring. I'm curious how long that happens, and I'm just kind of curious like how long does it take until we're in like kind of the open conflict like Second Age Endgame. You know,
Hmm.
if you watch the Fellowship of the Ring, the very first scene is that extended flashback narrated by Galadriel. That's what we are building to on this series, and I'm just curious how long does it take us to get there, right? Because there'll be some inciting incidents. What happens to Numenor? The Balrog in Moria, and then Sauron just starting to go on his attack. Like we know the key beats that haven't happened yet, but in the meantime, I'll be really excited to see like Elendil and Isildur found Gondor. That
Hmm.
hasn't happened yet. That'll be cool. You know, but yeah, in terms of Sauron, like apart from making the ring, it's again kind of an open book. So it's up to the showrunners to find stuff to
Figure out.
do. And I wonder how big of a character he will be. Will we see Sauron as much as we saw Halbrand this season?
Right.
I don't know.
Also, kind of funny that Sauron's just hot. Like you never really know what he looks like, and now you're just like, oh, he's just a really hot guy. Like,
He
cool.
was a deceiver, man. He can switch up his look. That was his
Yeah.
thing.
Um, I would say Rings of Power pretty successful for first season. I think it did everything you want. I'm invested in a lot of these characters and
Yeah,
excited for whenever we get season two. Any last thoughts for you though?
yeah. No, I totally agree about that. There was so much hype and build up and lead time to this series, and we know about the price tags and the
Hmm.
expectations put on it by Amazon. And like we said, there are flaws, there are things to improve on, but I think it's definitely a successful show. And I mean, in terms of the fantasy realm, it's this and Thrones. I think most people are going to start giving up in terms of making the next Thrones because there's no room. We have
Yeah,
House of the Dragon and Rings of Power, and that's enough. I think.
I completely agree. And we'll be talking about Thrones next week as well as some other big things. What do we got, Dave?
Oh yeah, just a few hitters. House of the Dragon season one finale. Can't wait. Uh, Big music. Arctic Monkeys come back. Four
Eh,
years. Taylor Swift less than 4 years, but she's back once again. 1 year. Uh, Carly Rae Jepsen as well. Shout out her. Tough week to release, but we'll be talking about you. And then on the movie front, I'll be talking about Park Chan Wook's first film in a while, Decision to Leave. And then, of course, we have Ticket to Paradise, a George Clooney, Julia
Julia
Roberts rom
Roberts.
com, NBD. And of course, the DC hierarchy is changing due to Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Black Adam. Let's fucking go.
Well, we got a stacked week, so hit that subscribe on youtube.com/nostalgiapod. Go to at nostalgiapod on Twitter and follow the link tree to listen to the podcast any way you want to there. And go to Spotify, follow our Nostalgia Best of 2022 playlist on there. We'll catch you next week.